but not always, no, not often, of the sort we want or expect. Petera Pike, that good old man, prayed devoutly, and I'm the hell.
P.
Let's go, Grizzin.
The blowers roared back to life. Blood's black floater heaved uneasily, rising stern first and rocking alarmingly.
The outsider sent to him to save the Mantian and its polyester silk concluded. He stepped back, coughing in the billowing dust, half to himself and half to the shabby crowd kneeling around him. He added,
I am to expect no help from him. I am help. If any of them understood. It was not apparent. Still coughing, he traced the sign of addition and muttered a brief formula of blessing, begun with the most sacred name of Paz, Father of the Gods, and concluded with that of his eldest child, Scylla, patroness of this, our holy city of Econ. As he neared the market, Silk reflected on his chance encounter with the prosperous-looking man in the floater. Blood, his driver, had called him. 3 cards was far too much to pay for answers to a few simple questions, and in any case one did not pay augurs for their answers. One made a donation, perhaps, if one was particularly grateful. 3 full cards, but were they still there? He thrust a hand into his pocket. The smooth, elastic surface of the ball met his fingers. He pulled it out, and one of the cards came with it, flashing in the sunlight as it fell at his feet. As swiftly as he had snatched the ball from Horn, he scooped it up. This was a bad quarter, he reminded himself, though there were so many good people in it, without law. Even good people stole their own property, vanished, and their only recourse was to steal in turn from someone eke. What would his mother have thought if she had lived to learn where the chapter had assigned him? She had died during his final year at the Schola, still believing that he would be sent to one of die rich Mantians on die Palatine and some day become prolocutor. You're so good-looking, she had said, raising herself upon her toes to smooth his rebellious hair. So tall, oh, Silk, my son. My dear, dear son. And he had stooped to let her kiss him. My son was what he had been taught to call layman. Even those 3 times his own age, unless Tae were very highly placed indeed, then there was generally some title that could be gracefully employed instead, conal or commissioner or even councillor, although he had never met any of the 3, and in this quarter never would, though here was a poster with the handsome features of Councillor Loris, the secretary of the Iontamiento features, somewhat scarred now by the knife of some vandal who had slashed his poster once and stabbed it several times. Silk felt suddenly glad that he was in the chapter, and not in politics, though politics had been his mother's first choice. For him, no one would slash or stab the pictured face of his cognizance, the prosecutor, surely. He tossed the ball into his right hand and thrust his left into his pocket. The cards were still there, 1, 2, 3. Many men in this quarter who worked from shade up to dark, carrying bricks or stacking boxes, slaughtering, hauling like oxen or trotting beneath the weighty litters of the rich, sweeping and mopping, would be fortunate to make 3 cards a year. His mother had received 6, enough for a woman and a child to live decently, from some fund at the Fisk that she had never explained, a fund that had vanished with her life. She would be unhappy now to see him in this quarter, walking its streets as poor as many of its people. She had never been a happy woman in any case, her large dark eyes so often bright with tears, from sources more mysterious than the Fisk, her tiny body shaken with sobs that he could do nothing to alleviate. Oh, Silk, my poor boy, my son. He had at first called Blood, sir, and afterward, my son, himself scarcely conscious of the change. But why? Sir, because Blood had been riding in a floater. Of course, only the richest of men could afford to own floaters. My son afterward. The old cull's dead, then. It doesn't make a bad bit's difference to us, does it, Patera? Nice of him. Blood's choice of word and phrase, and his almost open contempt for the gods, had not accorded with the floater. He had spoken better, far better, than most people in this quarter, but not at all like the privileged, well-towed man whom Silk would have expected to find riding in a private floater. He shrugged and extracted the 3 cards from his pocket. There was always a good chance that a card still, more, a card bit would be false. There was even a chance, as Silk admitted to himself, that the prosperous-looking man in the floater, that this odd man Blood, kept false cards in a special location in his card case. Nevertheless, all 3 of these appeared, completely genuine, sharp-edged rectangles 2 thumbs by 3, the complex labyrinths of gold insisted in some remarkable substance that was almost indestructible, yet nearly invisible. It was said that when 2 of the intricate golden patterns were exactly alike, one at least was false. Silk paused to compare them, then shook his head and hurried off again in the direction of the market. If these cards were good enough to fool the sellers of animals, that was all that mattered, though he would be a thief. A prayer, in that case, to Tenebris Tartaros, Pas's eldest, the terrifying god of night and thieves. Mater Marble sat watching at the back of her class. There had been a time long ago when she would have stood, just as there had been a time when her students had labored over keyboards instead of slates. Today, now, in whatever year this might be, her chronological function could not be called. She tried to remember when it had happened before. Maytera Marble could call a list of her non-functioning or defective components whenever. She chose, though it had been 5 years or 50 since she had so chosen. What was the use? Why should she, why ever should anyone, make herself more miserable than the gods had chosen to make her? Weren't the gods cruel enough, deaf to her prayers through so many years, so many decades and days and languid, half-stopped hours? Paz, great Paz, was god of mechanisms, as of so much else. Perhaps he was too busy to notice. She pictured him as he stood in the mantian, as tall as a talus, his smooth limbs carved of some white stone finer, grained than shiprock, his grave, unseeing eyes, his noble brows. Have pity on me, Pes, she prayed. Have pity on me, a mortal maid who calls upon you now, but will soon stop forever. Her right leg had been getting stiffer and stiffer for years, and at times it seemed that even when she sat so still, a boy to a girl, she's asleep, that when she sat as still as she was sitting here, watching the children take 19 from 20, 9 and get 9, add 7 and 17 and arrive at 23, that when she sat so still as this, her vision no longer as acute as it once had been, although she could still see the straying, chalky numerals on their slates when the children wrote large, and all children their age wrote large, though their eyes were better than her own. It seemed to her that she was always on the point of overheating any more, in hot weather anyway. Paz, great Paz, god of sky and sun and storm, bring the snow, bring the cold wind. This endless summer without snow, with no autumn rains and the season for them, practically past now. The season for snow nearly upon us, and no snow. Heat and dust and clouds that were all empty. Yellow haze. What could Paz, Lord Paz, husband of grain, bearing echidna, and father of the 7, be thinking of? A girl. Look, she's asleep. Another. Didn't think they slept. A knocker tied the Sun Street door of the palastra. I'll get it. That was Asphodella's voice. This was Ratel's. No, I will. Fragrant white blossoms and sharp white teeth. Maytera Marble meditated upon names. Flowers or plants of some kind, at least, for bio girls, animals or animal products for bio, boys, metals or stones for us, both together. Let me. Her old name had been. A crash as a chair fell. Maytera Marble rose stiffly, one hand gripping the window-sill. Stop. This instant. She could bring up a list of her non-functioning and defective parts whenever she chose. She had not chosen to do so for close to a century, but from time to time, most often when the cenobe lay on the Nightside of the Long Sun, that list came up of itself. Aquifolia, separate those two before I lose my temper. Maytera Marble could remember the short sun, a disk of orange fire, and it seemed to her that the chief virtue of that old sun had been that no list, no menu ever appeared unbidden beneath its rays. Both together. Seb, I wanted. Well, neither of you are going to. Maytera Marble told them. Another knock, too loud for knuckles of bone and skin. She must hurry or Maytera Rose might answer that knock herself, an occasion for complaint that would outlast the snow, if the snow ever arrived. I am going to go myself. Teasel, you're in charge of the class until I return. Keep them at their work, every one of them. To give her final words more weight, Maytera Marble paused as long as she dared. I shall expect you to name those who misbehaved, a good step toward the door. There was an actuator in her right leg that occasionally jammed when it had been idle for an hour, but it appeared to be functioning almost acceptably. Another step, and another. Good. Praise to you, great Paz. She stopped just beyond the doorway to listen for an immediate disturbance, then limped down the corridor to the door. A beefy, prosperous-looking man nearly as tall as Petra, Silk had been pounding the panels with the carved handle of his walking stick. May every god favor you this morning,
Maytera Marble said.
How may I serve you? My name's Blood.
He announced.
I'm looking at the property. I've already seen the garden and so on, but the other buildings are locked. I'd like you to take me through them and show me this one. I couldn't possibly admit you to our cenobe. Maytera Marble said firmly. Nor could I permit you to enter the manse alone. I'll be happy to show you through our mante iron and this palastra, provided that you have a valid reason for wishing to see them. Blood's red face became redder still. I'm checking the condition of the buildings. All of them need a lot of work, from what I've seen outside. Maytera Marble nodded. That's quite true, I'm afraid, although we do everything that we can. Patera Silk's been repairing the roof of the Mantian. That was most urgent, is it true?
Blood interrupted her.
The Cenobi is at the little house on Silver Street. She nodded. The manse is the one where Silver Street and Sun come together. The little three-cornered house at the west end of the garden. That's correct. Is it true, then, that Dia's entire property is to be sold? That's what some of the children have been saying. Blood eyed her quizzically.
Has Mater Rose heard about it?
I suppose she's heard the rumor, if that's what you mean. I haven't discussed it with her. Blood nodded, a minute inclination of his head that probably escaped his own notice.
I didn't tell that to headed butcher of yours. He looked like the sort to make trouble. But you tell Mater Rose that the rumor's true. You hear me? Tell her it's been sold already, Sib. Sold to me.
We'll be gone before the snow flies, Maytera Marble thought, hearing her future and all their futures, High Blood's tone. Gone before winter and living somewhere else, where Sun Street will be just a memory. Blessed snow to cool her thighs, she pictured herself sitting at peace, with her lap full of new fallen snow. Blood added,
Tell her my name.
Chapter 2. Tiach Sah, as it was every day except Sel's Day. From noon until the sun can be no thinner. The market was thronged. Here all the prodal out of Viron's fields and gardens was displayed for sale or barter, yams, arrowroot, and hill country potatoes, onions, scallions, and leeks, squashes yellow, orange, and white, sun-starved asparagus, beans black as night or spotted like hounds, dripping watercresses from the shrinking rivulets that fed Lake Limna, lettuces and succulent greens, of 100 sorts and fiery peppers, wheat, millet, rice, and barley, maize yellower than its name, and white, blue, and red as well, spilling, leaking, and overflowing from baskets, bags, and earthenware pots. This, though Patera Silk noted with dismay that prices were higher than he had ever seen them, and many of the stunted ears were missing grains. Here still, despite the drought, were dates and grapes, oranges and citrons, pears, papayas, pomegranates, and little red bananas, angelica, hyssop, licorice, cisley, cardamom, anise, basil, mandrake borage, marjoram, mullein, parsley, saxifrage, and scores of other herbs. Here perfumers waved lofty plumes of dyed pampas grass to strew the overheated air with fragrances matched to every conceivable feminine name. And here those glances warred against the savory aromas of roasting meats and bubbling stews, the stinks of beast and men and of the excrements of both. Sides of beef and whole carcasses of pork hung here from cruel-looking hooks of hammered iron. And here, as Silk turned left in search of those who dealt in live beasts and birds, was the rich harvest of the lake-gap-mouthed fish, with silver sides and starting eyes, mussels, writhing eels, fretful black crawfish with claws like pliers, eyes like rubies, and fat tails longer than a man's hand, sober grey geese, and ducks richly dressed in brown, green-black, and that odd blue so seldom seen elsewhere that it is called teal. Folding tables and thick polychrome blankets spread on the trampled, uneven soil held bracelets and ornamental fists, flashing rings and cascading necklaces, graceful swords and straight-bladed, double-edged knives with grips of rare hardwoods or colored leathers, and hammers, axes, froes, and scutches. Swiftly though he shouldered his way through die crowd, greatly aided by his height, his considerable strength, and his sacred office. Silk lingered to watch as a nervous green monkey picked fortunes for a card-bit, and to see a weaver of 8 or 9 tie the 10,000th knot in a carpet. Her hands working, as it seemed, without reference to her idle, empty little face. And at all times, whether he stood watching or pushed through the crowd, Silk looked deep into the eyes of those who had come to buy or sell, and tried to look into their hearts, too, reminding himself, whenever such prompts were needed, that each was treasured by Paz. Great Paz, with an understanding far beyond that of mere men, accounted this faded housewife with her basket on her arm more precious than any figurine carved from ivory, this sullen, pockmarked boy, so Silk thought of him, though the youth was only a year or two the younger, standing ready to snatch a brass earring or an egg, worth more than all the goods that all such boys might ever hope to steal. Paz had built the whirl for men, and not made men or women or children for the whirl. Caught today, shouted 6 voices, by the goodwill of melodious mulp or the accident of innumerable repetitions, for once practically synchronized. Following the sound, Silk found himself among the cellars he sought, hobbled deer-reared and plunged, their soft brown eyes wild with fright. A huge snake lifted its flat, malevolent head hissing like a kettle on the stove. Live salmon gasped and splashed in murky, glass-fronted tanks. Pigs grunted, lambs bayed, chickens squawked, and milling goats eyed passers-by with curiosity and sharp suspicion. Which of these, if any, would make a suitable gift of thanks to the outsider? To that lone nebulous god, mysterious, beneficent, and severe, whose companion he had been for a time that had seemed less than an instant and longer than centuries. Motionless at the edge of the seething crowd, one leg pressed against the unpeeled poles that confined the goats, Silk ransacked the whole store of dusty knowledge he had acquired with so much labor during 8 years at the Schola, and found nothing. On the other side of the goat pen, a well-marked young donkey trotted in a circle, reversing direction each time its owner clapped. Bowing a foreleg stretched forward, its wide forehead in the dust when he whistled. Such a trained animal, Silk reflected, would make a superb sacrifice to any god, but the donkey's price would be nearer 30 cards than Diary. A fatted ox recalled the prosperous-looking man called Blood, and Blood's 3 cards might well obtain it after a session of hard bargaining. Many augurs chose such victims whenever they could, and what remained after die sacrifice would supply the Palestra's kitchen for at least a week, and feed Mater a rose, Mater a mint, and himself, like so many commissioners as well, but Silk could not believe that a mutilated and stall-fed beast, however sumptuous, would be relished by a god, nor did he himself often indulge in meats of any kind. Lambs unrelieved black for Stygian Tartaros, deathly Hyrax and Grimphea, purest white for the remainder of the 9, were the sacrifices most frequently mentioned in the Krasmologic writings, but he had offered several such lambs already without attracting a divine presence to the sacred window. What sort of thanks would such a lamb, or even an entire flock of such lambs, for Blood's cards put a sizable flock within his reach, be now to the veiled god who had, unbribed, so greatly favored him today, this dog-headed ape, trained to light its master's way with cresset or lantern, and, according to a badly lettered placard, to defend him from footpads and assassins would cost at least as much as the donkey. Shaking his head, Silk walked on. A flyer, perhaps the same fleer, sailed serenely overhead, his widespread, gauzy wings visible now, his body a dark cross against the darkening streak of the sun. The burly, bearded man beside Silk shook his fist, and several persons muttered maledictions. Don't nobody ever want it to rain? The nearest of the sellers of beasts remarked philosophically, but everybody wants to go uneaten. Silk nodded his agreement.
The gods smile on us, my son, or so it is written. It's a wonder they don't laugh aloud.
Do you think they're really spying on us, Patera, the way the Iontamiento keeps telling us? Or do they bring on rain? Rain and storms, that's what my old father used to say, and his before him. I've noticed myself that it's true pretty often. Lord Paz must know that we could use some these days.
I really don't know,
Silk confessed.
I saw one around noon today, and it hasn't rained yet. As for spying upon Viren, what could a fleer see here that any foreign traveler couldn't?
Nothing I know about, the seller spat. That's supposed to bring on rain, too, Patera. Let's hope it works this time. Lookin' for a good sacrifice, are you? Silk's face must have betrayed his surprise, because the seller grinned, revealing a broken front tooth. I know you, Patera, that old Mantian on Sun Street. Only you went right on past the sheepfold today. Guess they haven't been working out for you. Silk endeavored to appear indifferent.
I'll recognize the beast I want when I see it.
Of course you will, so let me show you mine. Huh? The seller raised a soiled finger. No, wait a bit. Let me ask you one question first. I'm just an ignorant man, Patera, but isn't a child the best sacrifice of all? The very best gift that a man or even a whole city can make to the gods, the greatest and the highest? Silk shrugged.
So it's written, though no such victim has been offered here within living memory, I don't believe that I could do it myself, and it's against the law in any case.
Exactly what I'm getting at. Like a conspirator, the seller glanced warily from side to side. So what's nearest to a child, eh? Only on the right side of the law. What is it, I ask you, Patera, you and me being flash-grown men and not no sprats, that half those high-bred females up on the Palatine is given sucked to on the side? A catacrest, isn't that I? With a showman's flourish, the seller reached beneath the stained red cloth that draped his table and produced a small wire cage containing an orange and white keta crest. Silk was no judge of these animals, but to him it appeared hardly more than a kitten. The seller leaned forward, and his voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "Stolen, Patara. Stolen, or I couldn't possibly sell it, even to you for pawn." He licked his lips, his restless gaze taking in Silk's faded black robe and lingering on his face. "For just 6 little cards, it talks. It walks on its hind legs sometimes, too, and it picks up things to eat with its little paws. It's exactly like a real child, you'll see." Looking into the animal's melting blue eyes, the long, nictorant pupils were rapidly narrowing in the sunlight. Silk could almost believe him. The seller tested the point of a long-bladed knife with his finger. "You recollect this, don't you, Tick? Then you better talk when I tell you to, and not try to get away, neither when I let you out." If he had seen the motion, the seller ignored it. "Say shop. Talk for the Reverend Augur, Tick. Say shop." He prodded the unhappy little kata crest with the point of his knife. "Say it."
"Never mind,"
Silk told the seller warily.
"I'm not going to buy him."
"It'd make you a fine sacrifice, Patara, the finest you could have inside of the law. What was it I told you? 7 cards, was that it? Tell you what, I'll make it 6, but only for today. Just 6 cards, because I've heard good things about you and hope to do more business with you in the future." Silk shook his head again. "Told you Tick was boilin', didn't I? I knew it, and believe me, I put crimp on the lad that did it, or I wouldn't have got Tick here half so cheap. Talked about rollin' him over to Hoppy and all. That—"
"It doesn't matter,"
Silk said. "Son, or I'm going to let you steal him off me. 5 cards, Patara. You can talk, you little faker, say something. You can go through the whole market if you like, and if you can find a nice kata crest like this, any cheap, bring me there and I'll match the price. 5 cards, we'll say. You won't be able to touch 1/2 this good for. 5 cards. I promise you that, and I'm a man of my word. Ask anybody."
"No, my son."
"I need the money bad, Patara. I guess I shouldn't say that, but I do. A man has to have some money to buy animals, so he's got something to sell. See." His voice fell again so low this time that it was scarcely audible. I put mine into a few cold ons. "You take my meanin', Patara. Only they warmed up and went bad on me 'fore I could move 'em. So here's what I say, 5 cards, with one of 'em chalked. How's that? 4 down, see, right now. And a card next time I see you, which I will on Mulp's Day after this comin'. Sil's Day. Patara, I hope?"
"No."
Silk repeated. Word, the little catacrest said distinctly. "Shoo would, who had pen." "Don't you call me a bad man." Sliding the slender blade between the wires, the seller prodded the catacrest's minute pink nose with the point of his knife. "The Reverend Augur's not interested in seeing any cully bird. You fleabit little papsucker." He glanced up hopefully at Silk. "Are you Patara?" "It is a talk bird at that. Naturally, it doesn't look exactly like a child. It's a good talker, though, a valuable animal." Silk hesitated. "Very Ed word." The catacrest told him spitefully, gripping wire mesh of his cage. He shook it, minute black claws sharper than pins visible at the tips of his fuzzy white toes. "Adword," he repeated. "Ad speak, Adword." He repeated. Ad speak. No god had spoken through the sacred window of the Jew Welf, old Mantian on Sun Street, since long before Silk had been born, and this was an omen beyond question, one of those oracular phrases that the gods, by means no mere human being could ever hope to understand, insert at times into the most banal speech. As calmly as he could manage, Silk said,
"Go ahead and show me your talking bird. I'm here, so I might just as well have a look at it."
He glanced up at the narrowing sun as if on the point of leaving.
"But I've got to get back soon."
"It's a night show, Patara," the seller told him. "Only night show I've had this year." This cage as well appeared from under the table. The bird crowded into it was large and glossy black, with bright red legs and a tuft of scarlet feathers at its throat. The ad speak of the catacrest's omen was a sullen crimson, long and sharp.
"It talks?"
Silk asked, though he was determined to buy it whether it could or not. "They all do." Patara, the seller assured him, "all of these here night chows. They learn from each." "All do, Patara," the seller assured him, "all of these here night chows. They learn from each other, don't you see, down there in the swamps around Palustria. I've had a few before, and this one's a belter talk, than most, from what I've heard it say." Silk studied the bird with some care. It had seemed quite plausible that the little orange and white catacrest should speak. It was in fact very like a child, despite its fur. There was nothing about this downhearted fowl, to suggest anything of the kind. It might almost have been a large crow. Somebody learned the first back in the short, sometime. Patera, the seller explained. That's the story they tell about anyhow. I suppose he got sick of hearing it jabber and let it go, or maybe it give him the air, 'cause they're dimber hands for that. Then that went home and learned all the rest. I bought this off of a limer that come up from down south. Last Fay's Day, just a week ago it was. I give him a card for it. Silk grinned.
You've a fine manner for lying, my son, but your matter gives you away. You paid 10 bits or less. Isn't that what you mean?
Sensing a sale, the seller's eyes brightened. Why, I couldn't let it go for anything under a full card. Don't you see, Patera? I'd be losing on it, and just when I need jelts so bad. You look at this bird now, young and fit as you could ask for, and wild bred, and then brought here clean from Palustria. A bird diet cost you a card, every bit of one and maybe some over, in the big market there. Why this cage here by itself would cost you 20 or 30 bit.
Huh?
Silk exclaimed, rubbing his hands.
Then the cage is included in the price.
The clack of the Nightshow's bill was louder than its muttered. No, no. There, Patera. The seller seemed ready to jump for joy. Hear it. Knows everything we're savin'. Knows why you want him. A card, Patera. Full card. And I won't come down by one single bit. I can't afford to. But you give me back what I paid the limer, and this bird's yours. As fine a sacrifice as the prolocutor himself might make, and for one little card. Silk feigned to consider, glancing up at the sun once more, then around him at the dusty, teeming market. Green-shirted guardsmen were plying the butts of their slug, guns as they threaded the crowd, no doubt in pursuit of lounging youth. He had noticed earlier.
This bird's stolen property, too, isn't he?
Silk said.
Otherwise you wouldn't have been keeping him under your table with the catacrest. You talked of threatening the poor wretch who sold. You that? Roll him over to Hoppy. Isn't that what you said, my son?
The seller would not meet Silk's eyes.
I'm no flash cull, but I've learned a little cant since I've been at my Mantian. It means you threatened to inform on him to the guard, doesn't it? Suppose that I were to threaten you in the same way now. That would be no more than just surely.